You're listening to the Leading Healthy Creative Teams podcast with Matt Curtis. This is the podcast that helps you take your creative team from wherever you are today to healthy and effective.
Hey friends, thanks for joining me this week on the Leading Healthy Creative Teams podcast. This week I want to talk about the Creative Leadership Cohort that I'm launching, and I want to share my burnout story. Believe it or not, those two are wildly connected. The Creative Leadership Cohort is built specifically to help churches build healthy creative teams. That's the mission of the business that I'm building. But I want to do that by helping creatives in the church transition from an executor mindset to a leadership mindset. This was absolutely game-changing for me in my own ministry over the years. I spent the majority of my career as an executor and in a executor mindset. There was a real pivotal transition that happened through my burnout story that really revealed for me the importance of making this shift. And that's really kind of the connection between these two things. What I'm building here is the way for you to avoid burning out. So here's what we're going to go through in this cohort. The first week is managing reality. We got to understand what's the reality of our situation, get to know each other. It's very, kind of relationally driven that first week. But I want to call out some of the problems that each of us is dealing with. I have found over the years that when I hear the problems that other people are dealing with, it has done two things. First, it's affirmed that I'm skilled and gifted to be in the problems that I'm in. I am, in fact, built for the context in which I'm serving. Second, it also helps me realize, some of the problems I'm facing it's not as bad as I thought it was. That's a really important thing when you're weathering something that's hard, to recognize the perspective of saying, yeah, this isn't as bad as I thought it was, or it could be worse than this. It's very helpful. So we manage reality the first week. The next week, we talk about leading yourself. We talk about what does it look like for me to manage myself as a leader. As you lead more and as you move up on the org chart, fewer and fewer people are speaking into your life. Fewer and fewer people are helping you lead. There are fewer and fewer people that you can go to when there's a problem. At some point, if you become the senior leader of an organization, you are where the problems end up. The most complicated problems come to you. That means if you're leading a creative team, everybody below you is going to bring their problems to you. And so we're going to talk about that. What does it look like to lead yourself in the context of this movement of growth toward leadership? The next week, we're going to talk about the language of leadership. How do you understand the best way to present your message? This is really the tagline. The tagline of the cohort at this point is something along the lines of leadership won't hear me. Yeah, it's a real problem. This right here, the language of leadership, this is the key to beginning to be heard. I know for me, I struggled because I would lead with the creative. I would lead with the innovation. I would lead with the technology. But I needed to shift and lead to the mission. And so we're going to talk about what that looks like. The next 4 weeks are driven out of the 4 creative cores. Those are skills, systems, heart, and innovation. We're going to learn about how we can lead through each of those. And so that's going to be a deep dive on each of those 4 areas. And then once the cohort is finished, so that's our 7 weeks, after the cohort's finished, I'm going to have a one-on-one with each person that's participating. And we're going to talk about how do we apply these specific things, this leadership that you're developing and cultivating and starting to see the need for. How do we apply that in your life, in your context? What are the specific challenges that you face so that we can take this kind of sometimes abstract knowledge and apply it directly to your context? So that's what the Creative Leadership Cohort is all about. You can learn more. You can sign up at lunchtimeheroes.co. There is also an opportunity for scholarships. So I want to just make that evident. I really want to make sure that this is accessible. The mindset for me going into this is that I always had development funds. When I was working at a church, I could go to a conference, or I could at least apply to go to a conference, through leadership, and say, hey, is there a way we can allocate some dollars towards this? And my hope is that you're able to leverage these development dollars that you have in your organization effectively for something like this. I also recognize that not every church either had as much money as I was able to access, or maybe some even have any. And so that's really what the scholarship is designed to be for. If there's a gap that you need to overcome, let's have a conversation about it, because I really do believe that this is going to be a game changer for the health of church creative teams. That's why I'm building it. That's why I care about it. And that's also why I want to share my burnout story, because these principles would have prevented me from getting to the point of burnout. There's no question as I look back. So back in 2017, I quit my job. I was at the point where I was done. What led up to this, I had been promoted to leading communications, but the model of ministry had changed. We had gone from a regional megachurch to a multi-site church where the campuses had autonomy. So essentially I was working for 5 different churches, 4 of our campuses, but then we also had this like all church layer that sort of became its own entity because there were all church events that were mandated certain places, but then each campus had their own priorities. So the whole thing became not only complicated, but in that process, the role of communications changed. So as I was promoted, I was very excited because I had some ideas that I thought really could take our communication efforts to the next level. And not like hypey, but in a really effective way. We could really move toward meaningful communication in certain areas where I felt like we had an opportunity to improve. Well, I went on vacation. I remember this clearly. I went on vacation the week I was promoted. I had already had this vacation planned months in advance. And I get a call while I'm on vacation and someone's chewing me out because something that they wanted promoted wasn't being promoted. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't even know what's going on. Like I'm a zero decision maker right now because I'm just finding out about this change starting next week. And here I am getting, chewed out for something that I had no influence of whatsoever. So I get back after this vacation and by and large, it was good. I was very rested. I said, all right, here's the deal. We're going to hit the ground running. I want to make these changes to the bulletin. I want to do this. I want to do that. And my administrative assistant, she said, well, so you're actually not in charge of the bulletin anymore. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not in charge of the bulletin anymore. She said, yeah. And all of these other areas either. I'm like, what happened? I shouldn't have gone on vacation. So what was happening was the authority source for decision-making was being stripped away from all of the support teams and it was being given to the campuses. And on some levels, that makes a lot of sense. The problem though, is that our whole organization was staffed the other way. And so we were now putting additional pressure on the campuses to solve problems that they were not equipped for, while those who were equipped to solve the problems weren't allowed to speak in. So the whole situation was convoluted. There were a lot of growing pains. And I think what I found myself struggling most with was that I didn't feel like I had an advocate where I could communicate these challenges because I could see what was happening. I could see that the authority structure was creating problems. There was a really significant imbalance of the people that we had on the team. We needed to do a pretty dramatic restructure of our staff is what needed to happen. And the issue that I kept running into is as I would push some of these initiatives, I wouldn't get heard at all. I would get completely ignored. And I say that not to throw leadership under the bus, but because that's what was happening. No one was listening to what I was saying. And what I've realized is that I was leading with the wrong information. I wasn't leading with the argument of how do we help support this ministry model best? I was leading with, I hate my job and we need to fix it. Well, that's a real difficult sell to leadership because sometimes you're not going to love every aspect of your job. So that's a little bit of setting the stage of context for you. 2017 comes, I've been looking for a while now, finally found a job that seems like a good fit. Accept the job. We're going to be moving across the country, finally. So I quit, have my last day. It's very emotional because I love the church. I wanted success to happen there. Just felt like it was irreconcilable differences, to use that term. A couple days after I quit, my wife turns to me and she says, man, welcome back. I'm like, what do you mean, welcome back? I've been here, the whole time. She said, you've been a shell of yourself for probably the last 7 or 8 months. The job and the environment was so taxing for me personally. And that was really hard for me to hear because I didn't see how much these frustrations were impacting me on a very deep level, but they were. And as a creative, there are seasons that you go through where this happens. And it's really hard to have visibility of self on these things. It's important for you to have other people in your life that are going to be speaking in. So anyway, I've quit. We're done. The movers have come. They've taken all of our stuff. We only have a small U-Haul left that we're going to pack of that, that kind of like urgent needs stuff in case the movers get lost or blows up or something. So we're trying to pack and it's just not working. We had a health issue pop up in our family and it was severe enough where it was becoming very clear that we were not going to be able to make it across the country, let alone to our first stop. And so as we talked about it for a while, it became clear that we were going to need to stay just for the well-being of our family. And so that's what we did. I called my boss and I said, hey, I hear you guys are looking for a comm person. What do you think if it's me? And he's like, what are you talking about? You just quit. And so we filled him in on some of the situation that was going on, and they were super gracious. And they said, we'll figure it out, and come back on the team. We moved back into our house, had to call the movers, paid for them to move us out of and back into our house, which was a weird expense. So here's the problem. The problem was I was going back to a job that burned me out. So what in the world am I supposed to do here? Usually when you're in a job that you're frustrated with, you have quitting as something that's on your horizon. Well, at least I could quit. At least I could find another job. Because of the issues that we were dealing with from a health perspective, I didn't have that option. I didn't have the ability to make that decision anymore. That card was off the table. So now I had to figure out a way to make this work. And I didn't know what that was going to be like. I was going back to report to a different boss. As we talked over the first couple of weeks that I was back, he said, Matt, I don't know what's going on here, but it seems like everything's different for you. Like, it seems like you flipped the switch on the garbage disposal, and all of the gunk and all of the frustration and all of the angst, all this stuff's gone. And I don't know what you did to make that happen. I'm thinking, I don't either. So I actually told him, I said, look, we have to figure out why. We have to figure out what is going on here, because this is such a common problem in the creative space. And so this is why I say all of this, intersects with this cohort. The cohort is the expression of all of the things that I learned in my own transition back into the organization that burned me out. Because here's the catch. The next 3 years of ministry where I served on this church staff were by far the most impactful years of ministry that I had. No question. None at all. The initiatives that I proposed got heard like they had never been heard before. There was an initiative that I had pitched for 10 years. 10 years on staff. In that last stretch of time, those last 3 years, they accepted it, like almost aggressively. Like, yes, let's do it. It makes so much sense. I was so stumped as to why in the world are people listening this time. Is a fake quit the answer? Like, maybe that's the cohort, how to fake quit and get your same job back, 3 days later. No, that's not the answer. This is the answer. The answer is when you go back to a job that you can't leave, you have to figure out how to care less about your own stuff. And that always rubs people the wrong way when I present it that way. We're supposed to be passionate about what we do. Absolutely, yes. Be passionate about what you do. However, your job in the organization as a creative isn't just to be like esoterically creative. Your job is to hook the power of creativity onto the mission of the church. And what I began finding was rather than me leading with creative, I was leading with mission. I would come to the room. In some cases, I was invited into the room. Matt, we're dealing with these problems. What are some things that you think would be solutions to the problems? And so rather than me saying, guys, we really need to do this, instead, I would say, you know what? Here's the problem that I think we're trying to address right now as an organization. Do you guys agree? Is that something that's important enough to warrant our effort, our energy, and our attention? And if the answer is yes, this is something that I think could be helpful in addressing that. And here are the reasons that I think it might be that way. My statements were much less definitive. It wasn't, if you don't get on Snapchat, the church will shrink. Those were things that people would say. Those were things that I would say as a creative, not specifically about Snapchat. But we had people on our team that were that passionate about Snapchat being the thing that if we don't get on it, the church is done for. Leadership sees that these absolute statements, that if you don't do this, then this will happen, these are not the way that life works. As I've gotten older, I've seen that myself too. I've seen, oh, this is the thing that's going to change the game. No, it's not. It's not. Even the things that do change the game, like the internet has changed the game, but it's taken a long time to change the game. There's nothing that's instant that's going to be impactful for a long period of time. That's just not how lasting change works. Leaders know that. And now I know that. And now as I look back on this burnout story, seeing the transition from what I was before burnout, so frustrated, struggling so much with all of the no's and the we don't think that's important or we don't care. A lot of that, I think, was probably in response to the zeal that I came to the table with. So as a leader, my encouragement to you is to keep growing in the way that you're able to present mission-minded solutions. The cohort is going to focus that for the creative. But if you're not a creative, you're welcome to go through it as well. It's going to be very creative in its focus. But the reality is that change needs to come through the mission, not through our trades. That was a shift that was helpful for me, and that's really what's bottled in the Creative Leadership Cohort.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leading Healthy Creative Teams. This podcast is just one of the ways Lunchtime Heroes helps build healthy creative teams in the church. Stay up to date on the latest by signing up for the Creative Bites email at lunchtimeheroes.co.